paradigm shift, which the media have not acknowledged. What used to be left is now the center. All sorts of issues and all sorts of positions that used to be considered left-wing, being in favor of doing something about global warming was supposed to be a left-wing, marginal, even extremist position. Bringing the troops home from Iraq was supposed to be left-wing. Corporate responsibility, demanding regulations were supposed to be left-wing issues. Universal health care was supposed to be a left-wing demand. Now, we have 60 to 70% of Americans who are in favor of all these positions. So, as a result, the center has shifted. The media have not acknowledged it. But what is extremely ironic is that during this time, the right, the lunatic fringe of the right, that has taken over the Republican Party, our democracy, and our debate, is actually dominating both what's happening policy-wise and what we're debating. That is the extreme paradox of what is happening now. And that's what I've tried to capture in the book. And in the last week, we've had such demonstrations of that, starting with the ABC debate, when at the very moment, when over 80% of Americans believe that we are on the wrong track, 80%, we have George Stephanopoulos and Charlie Gibson, hardly right-wingers, right, who are asking questions about whether you are wearing a lapel pin of a flag, as though this is to be equated with patriotism, and whether Obama knew a 60s radical from the Weather Underground, and whether that somehow disqualified him from being president. This morning, and the reason why I had to change my flight is because I was doing an interview with John Stossel for his for what he's doing on Me and the Book on Friday on 2020, and we'll see how that turns out. And we had finished the interview and everything, but this morning they wanted to do a new kind of short interview about the ABC debate, because the Huffington Post, obviously did an enormous amount of critical pieces about the debate. And so my summing up to John Stossel was that as I tried to understand what happened during the ABC debate, I came to the conclusion that there are an enormous amount of self-loathing liberals around. And that's how I described Stephanopoulos and Gibson. Only self-loathing liberals would go on national television and mouth the talking points of Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly, not metaphorically, but literally. Because Sean Hannity actually told George Stephanopoulos on his radio show, why don't you ask about the Weather Underground? And George Stephanopoulos said, I'm taking notes. And he was taking notes. But it was followed up 2 days later with CNN announcing that they were hiring Tony Snow to be a political moderator. Tony Snow, day after day, stood at the White House and lied to the American people about the war, about whether the surge was working. And when he wasn't lying, he was displaying a callousness that should have prevented him from being in public life. Remember the moment that he had to announce that there are 2,500 dead now in Iraq among our troops? He said, well, it's a number. And I have a piece actually in the LA Times tomorrow where I describe a lot of those points that Tony Snow made, which had departed from the truth, to put it mildly. And now the network that calls itself the most trusted name in news is hiring him as a political commentator. So that's really what we have to expose. And since Brave New Films exposed what Fox is doing, now the next step is to expose what the mainstream media are doing. And in my book, my first 2 chapters are specifically about the media. The first chapter is called Equal Time for Lies, because the media somehow believe that every issue has 2 sides, and their job is to present you with both sides. So on global warming, say, they would present Al Gore or Lori or a proponent of the global warming crisis or the climate crisis on one side, and on the other, it would be somebody like Senator James Inhofe or Michael Crichton telling us that global warming is a fraud. And the job of the reporter or the interviewer would be to say, oh, here you have it. 2 sides to this issue, you make up your mind. And it's really a little bit like having a debate about whether the earth is flat. It's saying, okay, well, here we have Mr. X telling us that the earth is flat, and here we have Mrs. Y saying it's not, and I'm like Pontius Pilate, washing my hands off. What is truth? Who knows? It's all yours. I just want to end by saying it's kind of interesting that it was supposed to be the right that believed in truth, right? And we were supposed to be the relativists. We were supposed to be the postmodern relativists who really didn't believe in absolutes and truth. But all that has dramatically changed now. We are the champions of the truth. And that is really the greatest job we have ahead of us. Speaking the truth again and again and again, until all their lies and all their deceptions have nowhere to stand, that they're exposed. Like the little boy in the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale that said and cried out that the emperor wears no clothes. That's what it takes. And then when somebody cries it out, people look around and say, yes, the emperor and George Bush and Dick Cheney and Bill Kristol and Tony Snow, they wear no clothes, and we are going to cry that out. Thank you.